gonna start officially. Hello. My name is Margarita Kuleva, and I'm based just right here at Georgian Center as a postdoctoral researcher. Additionally to it, I'm a Tufts visiting professor, which is made possible also because of Artist Production Fund. Thanks to NYU, thanks to Tufts, thanks to this organization as well. And today we're gonna touch the topic, which is very complicated, complex, and vulnerable, and which is directly connected to my ongoing research project. It's a book project. It's called The Right to Be Creative. So one of the chapters is something, a couple of chapters, more like a couple of chapters already, is something I work on now at the moment, which is cultural production in wartime Russia. And I'm going to explain you my approach a little bit later. But what I want to deliver is that it's devoted to workers of culture, and many of them are less visible than the other ones. And that's why, it will be a bit monologic today for a little bit, but rather I prefer plurality of voices. And I'm very happy here, not just being alone speaking, but in this beautiful company of panelists that you can see. I'm gonna introduce the folks later, but I know that some of them actually made it specially to New York for this event, and I'm endlessly grateful for this. And so I send special greetings to those people in the chat. Many names I know already. And so I know that people joining from Europe, UK, and other parts of the US, and some from Russia. And I'm very, very grateful for your presence and support. It means so much to me. So we're going to organize the event in the following way. So it will be my monologic part. I'm going to give a talk reflecting on my current research about cultural production in wartime Russia. Then the most exciting part, when we're going to involve our 4 panelists who are here in this room, and then we just open up the floor for discussion offline and online. So while I announced this event in my social media, and with a call for people to join and speak out. So I really hope to hear a lot from you, and I'm very, very curious about that. So I'm going to start now, and I'll be speaking like 40 minutes, and then I'll stop speaking. Okay, I hope you can just see my presentation well. So as I said, that's the title of both my talk and the roundtable today, which is always hard to find the right words for, because I'm going to speak about, I want to take the situation, this actually kind of dramatic, if not tragic situation, globally. So it's about culture in Russia, but actually beyond, because of those people who had to leave Russia, as actually myself, and so many cultural connections that existed or appeared just since the war started. So it's never about Russia alone, as I see it. Let me just, okay, now I switch like that. So yeah, that's something that I covered. That's the plan for today, with a beautiful background showing creativity of those protesters who are still in Russia. That's Cold Eyes of my hometown, St. Petersburg, where someone put in Russian saying no war, and then their technical services trying to cover the war with the usual means of paint. So actually they try to paint the eyes, this picture. And I just think it's a beautiful illustration. So if you're creative enough, if you're artistic enough, that's a way to show protest. And this actually gave me a lot of inspiration for my project. So I'm going to start with introducing my approach and data for this research in an artistic way. That's one of the artworks I also find very inspiring. It's American artwork by Michael Asher, pretty known conceptual artist and educator who did this project for a commercial vitrine gallery in LA in the 70s. And so he didn't put any new works in the gallery. Instead of this, he just removed the wall between like exhibition space and the office. So those people and part of cultural production, which is usually invisible, became visible because of this powerful gesture. So I find inspiration in this work, and that's something I want to do. That actually me, like Ethnographer's Classic, me in the field. It's one of the organizations in Moscow, and it looks here pretty much dissimilar to what it usually looks like, because it's a back entrance for the workers. And there you can see those parts that are not exposed to visitors' view. So that's different kind of furniture. The workers who are not for those people who just see the display. The hidden part of this museum or any other cultural production, that is that, and that's happening. And one of my points, and I just want to make it clear at the very beginning, is that like there is protest we see, but there are unseen political struggles in many organizations of culture and symbolic production at large in Russia. They are actually struggling against it, against the war, but they're not exposed. Normally, if we use like a special technique or be attentive and monitor to hear these voices, we can grasp this protest as well. And it make me put like a more important question regarding the war and in general, like what do we count as protest, and how do we define that? So I call my approach creative ecology, and that's a specific term I developed in one of my recent papers called luminescent ethnography, seeing, trying to orient more in space of cultural production, meaning the darkest spots, meaning something that is concealed in both digital and material environments. And one of my recent paper is actually about dirt and dust in the museum, and about museum cleaners who are unseen usually. So also I base myself as a researcher the method of ethnography to see my approach is intersectional. And when we speak about this complexity of cultural worlds, I want to go nuanced and see intersection and interplay of gender, class, and other factors who actually shape work in culture. And again, as a researcher, as a cultural activist, I struggle for visibility of those workers who are unseen. So it's a complicated task to deliver today, because it's kind of a challenge given like so many categories of workers. I mean, but I try, and I really hope for your help during the discussion to touch all the topics we can touch today. So that's my data, and actually it's quite a lot already. And as empirical researcher, I find it's hard to stop sometimes. First, I use the pre-war archive of data when I was still based in Russia. So that's particularly array of data collected 2017, 2020 that contain interviews with cultural workers in Moscow, St. Petersburg, Yekaterinburg, and observation and my field diary from that time. And this part is important to use to define structures that pre-existed before the war. And well, partially they changed, but actually they didn't change completely. And I find important speaking about that. Also, that's a newer collection of data I've been working on, and I still work on it with cultural workers, those who still stayed in Russia, and those who left. I did, and again, I really am very grateful to Jordan Center to make it possible, because I did a series of field trips to Berlin, London, Paris. I also did some interviews in Sao Paulo with those people who immigrated there quite far from Russia. Then I took some key studies who help cultural workers and activist organizations in several cities, including London and Berlin. And the most unusual but very personal way to collect data in a very generalist way is an activist project I do myself. So my name is Rita. It's called Rita Helps. Oh, now it's playing. So that's like a consultancy I do for any people who are affected by the war in Ukraine, Ukrainians, Russian. I also had some participants from Kazakhstan, and some of them who are members of, who are citizens of European Union, but still affected by the war. So I do a session every Friday, and till now I did 61 with them. So I spoke to 60 people in different countries, still in Russia, still in Ukraine. Those who immigrated, they all fighting for their freedom and their right to continue their professional activities. I'm actually booked till April next year, so 24 sessions planned. So I work with these data, but also data coming from secondary sources as cultural policy documents and the news from Russia. And for me, and I think like quite recently at Jordan Center, the discussions about that took place, like how to actually work with for empirical research, how to work with materials coming from Russia being separated from the field, and how to make interview with those people who are vulnerable and who's still there, and to make it safe for them. So if we can discuss it, that would be fantastic, because that's something I think a lot by myself. And again, so the aim of this event is like I need your help. Yeah, help Rita helps. All right. So continuing, I'm going to speak a little bit, and I think it's very important to mention about the protest, which is clearly visible, and that appeared just since the war started. And I'm kind of very glad that it absolutely deserves a separate talk, but I'm very glad that a lot of feminist and female activists actually took the lead in protesting brutal power of Russian security services and those who stayed for the war activity, the militant power. That's one of the early action. Also in St. Petersburg, pretty much hippie-like, given the flowers to those people, to the police who came to deal with protesters. This one, and I'll translate this slide, that's an open letter from cultural workers against the war with Ukraine. So the petition appeared just next day since the war started in February 2022. And it resulted in 13,000 people signing the petition. Then it was sadly an unwanted continuation of the story, as so the list was open, and it was used by cultural organizations for policing, and those people who some people who signed it, and the police also used it, they were fired or arrested, or the case started. So it was concealed, but again, it shows how vulnerable it to be a protester in Russia, and I definitely want to get back to this thought throughout my talk. So many of you know Marina Vsenikova, who appeared during, it was last spring, who appeared with this anti-war. She's an editor, and this case, she was editor of Channel One, so the main source of TV propaganda in Russia. So she interfered a live show, news show, with her poster, and then was later arrested. It's important because Marina was an editor, and one of those people who are unseen, who actually made it visible through process. And there were so many artists and creatives arrested for their works against the war, but this case is special. This is Sasha Skocilenko from St. Petersburg. So many of you know that I have a creative practice as a performance artist myself, so using very similar methods as Sasha used. So she did a fantastic action in one of local food shops, like Russian 7-Eleven, replacing the labels for like the goods they have with the facts about war. She was arrested, and the trial is going on. So she is still in prison, and for those who follow the situation, you know, it's very uneasy to her, and as obviously for everyone, but she is fighting and struggling well. And of course, I just want to make my devotion to her brave activist, and as Sasha. Then I'm going to touch my phone and check the time, and know we are good, and touch the institutional context, which is more concealed and more complex. And just to summarize, like when Russia entered the war, what happened, what was that? So if we're gonna do like a very rough overview of cultural production in Russia, surprisingly, though, Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, but still the principles of cultural organization in many cases remain there. And what is important, and I think also not mentioned enough, that's if we take Russian cultural marker, the governmental sector would be the leading, and so the government, not the government, so public sector would be the leading. So most of the cultural organizations in theater, museum sectors, visual art are supported by the government, and it actually creates a very complicated situation, as so they actually supported by people of Russia, by the taxpayers, but at the same time the funds are regulated by Putin's government. So it's really hard for cultural workers to operate in this system, as well as for taxpayers who at the same time give their funds for the taxes both to the hospitals and museum and education, which is still largely free in Russia, and to the war and the military power. So it's kind of a double layer we can spot here. What is still important is that, like, the domination of understanding of culture as high culture, without a focus on new technologies, which is not made enough. This experimentation of new formats, but still seeing culture in very old established categories. I'm not going to speak about that a lot, but as I could see during my PhD dissertation about cultural work in Russia in comparison to the UK situation, still, like, low paid work, cultural work in Russia is usually a collective project oriented for producing a result not for the visitors but for eternity, and pure art for art's sake, and cultural organization as understood by cultural workers themselves is not a project, as we can largely see in more neoliberal cultural economies, is an organization that should exist like for many years, dozens of years, and which is also kind of ironic legacy of Soviet regime. Some of the museums have state graveyards. So some of the cultural workers hope they can take the place next to their colleagues after completing their career and in the lifetime. So it's, yeah, culture in Russia is for long. So this attitude is spotted by me in my research, not among those cultural workers who are quite adult, but also young ones. And for being cultural workers, having this solid identity, it's kind of very hard to turn to something else. And that's something that I see a lot among those people who are immigrated, even though they're quite successful in what they do. In other countries, they still have this identity of making culture in this certain way. And that's an example I especially like and find it illustrative. Some of you can recognize the Hermitage facade, but it's not Hermitage. It's an organization that doesn't exist since the war started. They closed up, showing their process, street art museum in St. Petersburg, and their exhibition from 2017. Actually, the institution was open at a private factory, and they built their own hermitage by the powers of street artists. And they put, because it was about revolution, they put Lenin statue in a very classical way there. So it's something useful, something full of young energy, and something very alternative to traditional art, but still reproducing similar patterns of seeing culture. And that's, for me as a researcher, it was quite surprising. Then another point of complication is that, like, what is cultural policy in Russia at the moment? And of course, in the news, we all see like a huge amount of propaganda, and sadly, how high culture is used for cultural war. And we know cases when the Dmitri Shostakovich symphony was actually played in occupied Mariupol, how posters depicting Pushkin and Tolstoy and other Russian writers were on flags of war in Ukraine, as well as Russian language was used as a weapon in cultural war. So together with these obvious features of new policy for culture and propaganda, we can also see some complications as these. So I'll translate it in a second, but it was important to show it as a document signed by Minister Mishustin, who the document signed in September, and with first results they expected for March 2022 is for development for creative industries in Russia in the wartime. And my expectation as a researcher of creative industries, which I did in the UK while doing my PhD, is that like that's the most Western conception of doing culture. And my obvious expectation was they will shut down the creative industries program, which they did not. And it's actively developed. And sometimes when I can join Zoom, I visit governmental forums for culture. And together with that science, the words about creative industries and talent that should generate profit, they're there. And actually, I mean, like I should report issues of plagiarism, because in this word, so I translated some of the definitions from this bill signed by Mishustin, and some of the definitions are copy-pasted word by word from British policy documents from the end of 90s. Without any change, and without and I can say that as a researcher of the British situation, precarity had resulted at, and major cultural crisis. So it was copied in wartime Russia, that is against the West, actually copied the most Western cultural policy from neoliberal 90s. So that's one of the riddles I'm dealing with. So my question is that when this big change, like how serious this obvious turn to conservative values, and if these values are just like a manicure of the previous policies, or because in the content of cultural policy, I find it like pretty, let's call it like a monstrous fusion, like that. And then the other thing I want to, you have a quick look at that. The word they use there, which is not in British policy document, but is Russian grown, is all popular in Russia, is creative cluster. And creative cluster or creative space, it was a very popular cultural format in 2010s in Russia that grew up widely without any governmental support. And one of the one of the most beautiful spaces like that. So that's abandoned mansion house in St. Petersburg, where was a cluster called Quota or Четверть in Russia, and they had to. It was actually home for many independent initiatives and initiatives that are DIY and for civil rights in Russia as well, or for independent art. So it was closed 3 times in 2014, 16, and 17 without any governmental support. And now organizations like that, they're actually part of wartime cultural policies. So they were always, like many of them, most of them, they were antagonists of what the government did, and there were no connection. So that's rather puzzling, as I would say. Again, I cannot mention the change going on in industry of visual art. Specifically, I want to briefly mention just 2 cases. So a lot of key museum practitioners were fired, starting with Pushkin Museum director Marina Lashak, who had to step down after many years of service. And another case is I actually look at very closely in one of my upcoming articles about the Hermitage. Hermitage, which has their own former imperial palace and residency of Russian tsars and emperors. They actually took for years. It was policy like pure art for art's sake, ignoring political changes. It was like that in 2014 when they hosted manifested during Crimea annexation, and Pietrovsky did a public statement saying like, well, these political circumstances, they should be beyond museum activity, which is for eternity. And so he's speaking about like different temporalities that museums have. So this is a very surprising change. Pietrovsky openly taken the pro-war position in a kind of aggressive way. So I want to quickly mention those institutions who've been very international, the private institutions existing in Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other cities. I just show you the slide. That's one of the most recent one. GES2 just opened just next to Kremlin, that changed their board of directors and executive director since the war started. And actually, they opened in 2021, like positioned themselves as one of the most international agents in the Russian art scene, having a huge part of Ragnar Kirchison work in the exhibition that was taken down because of artists' intention not supporting the war. And there is his Santa Barbara living sculpture that stopped because of the war beginning, now taking a different policy. And speaking of Russian culture, as Korea as a market, as a job market, we can actually trace a very interesting tendency that a lot of cultural workers, leading cultural workers, left Russia. And so there were many job opportunities open. But again, like ethically, to take these jobs is kind of very problematic, because that's wartime Russia. And again, so one thing is just opportunity to live in the country and actually make a living out of professional activity. Many cultural workers so dedicated to, but at the same time supporting the war, being part of this pretty much government-led system. Then so that's a part of these cultural institutions as guests to, or garage museums, museum and so many other private institutions that I took a closer look at during my research, and they actually have a hard time. Well, if you're interested, you can check some of my papers about that. But a very important thing I wanted to leave it here is that so these institutions had an interesting status of being kind of international scene, or well, many of my interviews used the world as oasis islands that are not part of Russia, but part of a global context, when they can open up a little more. And that deals with political positions, that deals with gender identities, that deals with sexual identities. And well, sadly, this space that was pretty much contested, but in a way stateless, just became tiny, given an opportunity for some of the cultural workers and visitors to breathe, but not offering as much as before. And that's a thought that is important, but I want to touch it very briefly, because I feel like I need to conclude like in 5 minutes or something. That's a quote from one of the interviews I took in Moscow when we were talking about labor rights, because as many cultural organizations, they don't actually give that much in terms of like social guarantees, or they unlawfully use long working hours of their workers. But then to deal with these violations of law and contracts, they should be courts, or they should be labor commission, like state labor commission invited. And many of the workers didn't actually fight for their rights, because they love the institutions so much. And that's how we discussed that, saying one of the interviews said, like, I don't need cops in my house. Like, I don't want to fight for my rights, because then I need to involve state in this stateless oasis. So you can even imagine like how complicated that for the workers also stand for their right in these political limitations. Now I think I just want to show you some of the beautiful examples of exhibitions, of anti-war exhibitions that actually took part in Russia since the war started, and they were rather open. This is a work called Visna from Ася Marakulina. That's a living sculpture which is made in Berna. As I believe, this is Rodion Kitaev. The exhibition actually took part in St. Petersburg in a private gallery and was announced as anti-war. So I remember that these cases. This is Media Arts Lab. And that's a wordplay in Russian, because they are young trees that in Russian called Sargency, but also sargency means political prisoners as well. And the exhibition led to free these young trees and free political activists. Some of shows like that were stopped and were attacked by police, but actually, I think it's quite interesting to acknowledge that some of them uh, just went successfully without police intervention. Still, it's a huge risk. I think this part is important, but I have to skip it. I just want to say that the ground of huge migration and need for cultural workers to live in the new context led to formation of new organizations, half activists, half commercial, helping them to apply for a visa. One of them is very noticeable, and the activity is very important. It's called Philosophers Ship, but it's a telegram service and a company that helps artists to apply for global talent visa. In the UK, it started as an activist service, but due to huge popularity, it became a commercial firm. And actually, they hired those people who escaped from Russia due to visas. So, and a similar organization called, well, Instagram is banned in Russia, but now that's Immigram. So Immigram is a service for those people who escape their countries, and it helps with visas and finding like new professional life in the countries they go to. So it's paid service, and the founders actually connected to the philosophership, and it was part of a scandal as one of IT competitions. It was awarded a large investment grant, and then it was taken down because of it was connected to Russian organizers, and the competition decided not to support these Russian-born entrepreneurs. So these organizations exist, and I think it's important to mention like activist power of them, but also that like economically they are really interesting and hybrid. Yeah, it's just like I want to mention that I really want to do, and looking for support for that's a example of a possible exhibition called Mapping Art Protest in Russia I'm working on and hoping to find funds. So if you have ideas, please approach me immediately. As well as the other initiative that I started and I still hope to work on it, that's Archive for those researchers who can't really and I believe researchers should really go to Russia at the moment. So that's anti-war art archive to make it possible to see for researchers outside of Russia, as much of this art, that's a lot of this art, and it's posted on Instagram that is banned in Russia. It's posted on the services that make the creators of this art vulnerable. So I really hope to create a safer service connecting artists and researchers and students to see this art. And again, that's something I'm working on currently. I think at this moment, I will just share my Instagram too, and stop speaking, giving opportunities to more people join. Thank you very much. Well, you hear from me more as well. But now I want to open the panel discussion, which I'm very happy about. And yeah. Okay, so the plan is we're gonna give the beautiful four panelists, and I can't wait to hear from them. So I'm gonna give each of them 10 minutes, and then we open the floor for your questions and remarks. And many people on Zoom, I believe they have a lot to say. So we actually start with Darida, who's still just right here. So Darida Maria Benfield is an artist, researcher, and theorist, Panama, US, Finland. Her work is focused on mobilizing decolonial feminist aesthetics toward pluriversal world creation. She is the author of numerous journal articles and book chapters, as well as co-editor of special issues of journals as Urgent Pedagogies. You can also find my article there. Technologies, machine intelligence, tempos. Should I say migratorios? Migratorios?
Yeah,
Migratorios.
Tiempos migratorios.
Tiempos migratorios, beautiful. She writes and publishes in English and Spanish. Her work has also been published and translation to French, Portuguese, and Russian, actually. In 2017, she co-founded the Center of Arts, Design and Social Research, CADISAR, and its research and program director. Benfield holds MFA in Video and Film School of Art, Institute of Chicago, and MA and PhD in Comparative Ethnic Studies and Design with emphasis in women, gender, and sexuality studies from Berkeley. Her doctoral research engaged third cinema as decolonial feminist project in contemporary art cinema and digital cultural production. You have 10 minutes.
Thank you. And I just want to say it's such a pleasure to be joining you here with Rita Kuleva, who's such an important interlocutor, along with my other colleagues on the panel. I took a few notes before the panel, and now, of course, hearing Rita's very rich discussion, I have many more thoughts. So I'll just try to touch on some of the key questions that are, I think, being posed by both Rita's research and the title of our session. Perhaps I'll begin actually with by bringing in another voice, which is the voice of Medina Tlostanova, who is another interlocutor of mine, of ours, working in the space of decolonial aesthetics, thinking from the non-European ex and present colonies of the Russian Soviet Empire. In her recent article, Discordant Trajectories of the Post-Soviet, Post-Colonial Aesthetics in the journal Interventions, she writes, "It is an anti-colonial symphonic improvisation which can be played on different instruments, sung in a chorus of different voices, and sounded in many pluriversal ways, yet which always preserves its main recognizable features that in the present situation of global crisis acquire additional relational angles." So here she's trying to describe the many different strategies of anti-colonial, decolonial thinkers, artists, writers, makers in the context of the post-Soviet society, and how they are creating a polyphonic range of strategies of expression. And I just want to echo that sense of polyphonic making that is emerging in the space of the anti-war activist art that's being produced, and how in the diaspora, as it is also emerging, I think that we have to open our ears to listen for that polyphony. We have to listen for the many different strategies that are emergent. And that I think requires revising our senses of even what anti-war activist art is, and also who makes it, in what conditions, where is it seen, how is it distributed, what are the new forms of exhibition and also translocal connectivity that are important to sustain as anti-war activist art is happening across the planet. And with that, I want to underline the sense that I have very deeply of, in fact, all of us being in a condition of global warfare. It is certainly a condition that has marked my entire lifetime. And as an artist, many of my own works have addressed conditions of warfare, including a very early video artwork called Refugees, in which I meditated on the mediatized environment of newsreel images of the Vietnam War that I grew up with on television growing up in the United States in the 1960s and early 70s. I went on to then meditate on the conditions of my mother's immigration from Panama to the United States as a dispossessed and displaced person after the US occupation of the Canal Zone and the many different cultural and economic effects that had. And in a series of works called Canal Zone, La Zona del Canal, and then Hotel Panama, more recently, I've been thinking through what are the aesthetic, the personal, the political legacies of that work. In making that work, there are trans-local and comparative transnational questions that emerge. I want to understand not only my own experience, but the experiences of other artists, scholars, activists who are working on understanding, listening to, and expressing and sharing the experiences of displacement and of being anti-war in a condition of global warfare. In doing so, I think it's also important to highlight the personal connections. And I was thinking about the work of writer Shireen Moraga, the Chicana lesbian activist artist, and her work, Loving in the War Years. In that work published in 1983, she's thinking specifically about the conditions of being a lesbian feminist and challenging the anti-lesbianism in mainstream feminism in the United States and also in women of color feminism. So a very specific condition of thinking about war. But in that, there is an emphasis on the interconnection of transformation, the interrelation of social transformation, the need that we have for each other, to recognize each other, to allow ourselves to be human beyond how we have been defined in situations of racialized and gendered oppression. And so I want to raise that question regarding our senses of each other, as trans local interlocutors, as artists, as anti-war activists, and how do we really see one another, and how do we allow for each other's research, allow for each other's experience, allow for each other's spaces of creation? How do we support each other in our collective work? I'm not sure where my time is at now, but I did want to share that I first met Rita in
I wanted to write.
You won't? Okay, then I should watch my time. Should I see? I met Rita in Helsinki in 2018 at the opening of the Digital Youth in the Media City exhibition at the Helsinki Art Museum, and immediately recognized in her a kindred soul based on her commitment to recognizing and witnessing subversive cultural practices and undergrounds. And I was drawn to her openness, her broad understanding and critical approach to cultural work. And as I learned more about her work, understanding how she untangles the complexities of what might seem like the success story of Russian contemporary art in the 1990s and 2000s. And so this then is perhaps an instance of love in the war years, my close friendship with Rita, despite the many barriers to this, including the Cold War and its imposition of a wall between Russian and American scholars and artists. And so this sense too of our translocal conversation, I want to also tie to the work of the Center for Arts, Design, and Social Research, which is an international translocal research project that brings together artists, scholars, and activists in research residencies, workshops, and other shared projects around the world. And through those translocal networks then emerges a sense of one another as we face particular conditions of harm and of impending danger given our geopolitical context. And this includes, for example, now colleagues in Palestine who are facing immediate danger for themselves and their families and their projects. And with that, I want to say ceasefire now. And I'll end there.
Thank you, Dalida. I really want to respond, but I can't. We need to move, but we still have time to talk, and that's amazing, very inspiring. Thank you. I'm going to introduce our next speaker at this point, which is Susan Katz, sitting right here. Susan is the program director of CEES ArtsLink and has more than 25 years of experience in the field of transitional cultural exchange and directs CEES ArtsLink, Art Prospects, program in public art, social practice art, and professional development in post-Soviet countries. She works closely with a diverse network of international partner organizations, funders, and artists to develop, finance, and coordinate the collaborative activities of the Art Prospect Network. Susan has a PhD in public administration from NYU, welcome back, and wrote her dissertation on the development of non-profit cultural organizations in Russia. She taught courses in public art and arts management in the MA and curatorial studies program at Smolny College of Liberal Arts in Pittsburgh from 2016 to 2022. Welcome, Susan. You have 10 minutes.
Great. Well, thank you, Vida. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm really grateful that you organized this roundtable on this conversation. I feel that since the war, there's been a reluctance among arts people, academia, the whole country to talk about what's going on in Russia and to really think about what we can do next. And I just want to briefly talk a little bit of sort of my personal feelings about this and my experience, because I have lived in St. Petersburg, Russia for most of my professional life. And the last 20 years, I was living in St. Petersburg, directing the office of CEES ArtsLink. And we left when the war began. And CEES ArtsLink is an organization that was created 60 years ago during the Cold War. And, you know, when it was created, the idea was to bring together people from the United States and the Soviet Union and also Soviet bloc countries, with the idea that if people get together and get to know each other, then the risk of war will be less. And it was a great idea. And they've been working on this. We have been working on this for many, many years, and transitioned in the last 20 years to focusing on cultural exchange and bringing artists together for residencies, for collaborative projects, for public art festivals. And it's been, for me, a great tragedy that when the war started, I think the organization was really at a loss of what do we do? How do we react to this? Because obviously we wanted to immediately say we're against the war, we're against the actions of Russia, but what does this mean for the arts community? And I think, you know, today we're still struggling with this question. I think a lot of other international organizations are having these same questions about, how do we make it very clear that we're against the war, that we're against the actions of the Russian government, that we want to support the Ukrainian people, but we still very much need to support the independent artists and curators and arts people in Russia. And that's what we've been really struggling to do as an organization. I wanted to also just talk a little bit what I've seen in terms of working with Russia, because obviously I'm still very much in contact with people. We had 2 staff people who worked in St. Petersburg. Both of them left fairly quickly, and one is now based in France, one is based in Germany. I'm sure Rita and Nikita have found the same thing, that younger people have left from the arts world. Everyone I feel like who can has left. People more of my generation have stayed because 1, they don't have the opportunity to leave. 2, they have families there. Financially, it's not possible. And these people are really at a loss of what do you do? How do you continue living in a country that you don't believe in what your government's doing, that it's dangerous to say anything? And I think people are in a really depressed state. So back to what can we do? And that's for me is what's really, I'd love to hear from other people about what you think should be the steps forward. As an organization, we have been trying to both support Ukraine and quietly continue to work with Russian artists. And to my amazement and joy, really, the US Embassy in Moscow has continued to support cultural exchange between US and Russian artists. And so they have been supporting projects from a number of organizations to keep this going. And so we've been fortunate to get funding from them to be able to bring Russians out of Russia to do collaborative projects. And we recently did 2 projects. One was a educational program on socially engaged art, which took place in Almaty and brought together 6 Russians, 6 Kazakh artists, Armenian, Belarus, and American artists. And they really worked together over the course of 2 weeks, talking about, what does social practice art mean, but also what is our relationship to each other, and very much focusing on what you were talking about earlier about colonialism and post-colonialism. And it was really quite, for me, a inspirational and important gathering, because again, it showed how important it is to bring together people from different nationalities. But if you're going to talk about colonialism, you need to have Russians as part of this conversation, and that you can't talk about the impact of their country's policies for so many years without including them in this dialogue. So that was wonderful. And then we also did a public art festival in Bishkek, which again brought together Russians, Kyrgyz, Georgians, Americans, who created works together and worked together on a festival that was about the environment and the problem of pollution in Bishkek. So now, as we're trying to move forward as an organization, we're thinking, how do we keep supporting Russian artists? Our board is very concerned that if we bring Russian artists to the United States, it could be dangerous for them when they come back. They're also, I think, very concerned about, what will other organizations think about us if we're working with Russia? What will our Ukrainian partners think about? And these, I think, are questions that we all have to talk about and try to figure out a way to get through this, because for me, I think what is most important is that we keep the dialogue going, and that we do find a way to continue to bring Russians and Americans and people from around the world together to talk about these issues and to work on them. So I'd love to hear from other people about how you think we can continue to support the independent arts community in Russia, which is very much in need of support. And I very much welcome this idea of broadening this conversation to other countries, because as we see the world is falling apart around us, and how can we use these experiences to help support each other. So thank you.
Thank you. With no delay, I need to introduce our next panelist, which is Oning, artist and director of documentaries. I'm sorry for my pronunciation. San Yuan Li and Meishi Street, chief curator of Shenzhen and Hong Kong BCT Biennial of Urbanism and Architecture in 2009, jury member of 8 Venice Prize at Venice Biennale 2009, member of the Asian Art Council at Guggenheim 2011, founding chief editor of the literature journal Chutpa. Close enough. Sorry. Founder of Bishan Project 2011-2016, visitor professor at Columbia, School of Planning, Architecture and Preservation 2016 and 17, and senior research fellow of Center for Arts Design and Social Research 2020-2023. His most recent book is Utopia in Practice, Bishan Project and Rural Reconstruction, Belgrave Macmillan 2020. Only you have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Thanks, Rita. I'm very happy to join the discussion. I would like to share some of my opinion about the war. And when the war broke out, I was in China at that time. And then all the people who was brainwashed by the CCP believe that the Russia will win the war in 1 month. But unexpectedly, the war lasts more than 1 year, and it seems not will be ending. We don't know. We keep going. And as a artist curator, I'm interested in how the artists, how the art people respond on this situation, and also because I pay attention to the Ukraine war because today, because the strong relationship between China and Russia. Yeah, I believe Xi Jinping would take this war as a something like he hoped that Putin that can create a successful example for him in the future to launch the war on Taiwan. So China support Russia a lot actually. And also I follow some people, some Chinese people who live in Ukraine on Twitter. And that guy, he update every day about the situation. Because China believe Russia will win in 1 month. So he did not inform any Chinese people who live in Ukraine to leave the country. And then the war became very close to me. It's not like before, about 10 years ago when you talking about Iraq war. And I only can see those news from the printing media. It seems far away from myself. But this time I feel very close because the one reason is the relationship, a strong relationship between China and Russia, and also because of the social media. You can follow very detailed update every day. And as you put Rita's presentation, and I saw a lot of people quit from their position in the National Museum or Gala Contemporary Art Center. Some individual artists protest inside Russia, and I also saw Banksy create about 7 murals in Ukraine. I think this is a very a good reaction from the art scene. Just as somebody said, actually culture can be the third front in the world. That people can express their protests and help to raising the donation to support the sanctions to support Ukraine. And myself, of course, I support Ukraine. I understood. I really worry about the relationship between China and Russia. I'm also worried about Taiwan. Recently, we have to face a lot of crises, from the COVID to the Russia-Ukraine war, and recently the Israel and Palestine war. When this happened, we have to, it seems to me we have a lot of debates, even at home or with a colleague, with some friend, and even in the bar, in the cafe, you have to debate about the recent issue. So we need to pick a side. Which side you stand? It seems very difficult, but for me, I would side the people, the ordinary people. I would like to divide the ordinary people and the political group. So that is very important. I think during the American and China relationship, even when Trump was as the president, the Department of State of the United States, actually they have a very good China policy consultant, Mr. Mao Chunyu. He gave a very good suggestion for the Mike Pompeo, that he said CCP and China are not the same thing. That means actually CCP could not represent the Chinese people. So when United States deal with China, the United States should understand when you criticize the CCP, it have no connection with the Chinese people. That is very smart suggestion, because CCP always say they represent the Chinese people. But normally, as I understood, recent years, the representative politics is totally get into failure. It doesn't work. Even in democracy country, sometimes a political party could not represent anyone. It makes no sense. So if you can divide a political group from ordinary people, and then you can get a right positions to make your judgment on some topic, on political topic. And that is why I really like a artist, Michael Rakovich. I just mentioned his name with Susan. And he was a Iraqi artist who lived in the United States. When the Iraq war started in 2003, he started a project called Enemy's Kitchen. He trying to make the Iraqi food in the public school in New York, and he also make a food church in Chicago to teach people how to cook the Iraq food. That is a food from a so-called enemy. And this is a so good way to understand from a cultural perspective, to understand your enemy. And that is why I believe culture is, from a cultural perspective, it's very good to make a judgment which side you should support. So if you support the ordinary people, you always be right. And now I also found actually to deal with the war situation from artists, from journalists, from writers, from cultural people. They can do it in a very humanistic way. It's not like a politician. It will be in a very well way. That is why I always pay attention to the artist response to the war situation. So whatever today, when people ask which side you are stand in the Palestine and Israel war, I always say I just support the ordinary people.
Finally, we switch into Nikita's listener sitting right next to me. So Nikita is an artist. Nikita is a multimedia artist who studies sculpture in St. Petersburg Stiglitz Academy since 2018. Nikita has several solo exhibitions, including most recently unfinished project in the Boris Yeltsin Presidential Center in Yekaterinburg, 2021. His work has been featured in several group exhibitions in Paris and Moscow, St. Petersburg, and other cities. His project, Karate Poetry, was shortlisted for the Innovation State Prize and the New Generation category in Russia in 2021. His work is in permanent collection of Metropolitan Museum of Art, New York, the Met Art Museum, Amherst, Massachusetts, and the Museum of Russian Art in Minneapolis, as well as private collections in the United States, Russia, and Western Europe. Nikita, you're great, but we still have 10 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you, Rita. Thank you. Very official. Yeah.
That's what you said.
Right. Yeah. I should expect we will read it for everybody.
Try.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm an artist and I would work in Perm. It's a rural part of Russia, but the last decade I spent in St. Petersburg. And I left Russia like a week after the war in Ukraine started. So I flew with my spouse for Georgia, and I spent a year in Georgia, in Tbilisi. And after that, I moved here in the United States. I just think it's important for me. I mean, what I can do here in the discussion is just share my experience, because I'm not a researcher. I really just observe what's going around. But I think it will be better just to show my point of view. And what I can say is so about art. I think what I realized during that time is I think my art is not a great tool for protest, for kind of like stop the war. I mean, it can't stop the war, and I think it's kind of, I mean, I think if I want to protest, I would prefer other methods, like I would use simple text, plain, straightforward. I would use video. I mean, I did use, I still use, and some other media which kind of like simpler, but also which show my point, and which I'm careful media. And I think my art is too complicated to do this work, and I think it didn't work worse than straightforward message in that particular situation. Another thing I wanted to say and discuss and like bring for discussion, that I live here in New York, and I think it's still very important for me to share my ideas with people who live in Russia and who still stay in Russia. And I spend a lot of time thinking about like how I can smuggle something into Russia, how I can share some of my art inside of the country. And I think it's important to underline that contemporary art in Russia is very niche. And for example, if you are an actor, like famous actor, or like musician, some folk musicians, you will be probably all the time on the spot. But as an artist, you kind of have more freedom. I decided not to participate. I mean, I can participate in exhibition of like government museums. They under really heavy censorship, and it doesn't make sense. I don't have a conversation about that, like open conversation with one of curators. They are great people, but I should ask, so can I do something without censorship, like it's possible right now? And they said, no, we have some restrictions. And I said, okay, I have to already know. And in some small venues, I think you still can show something like more or less free. So yeah, I think this is like pretty much it. What like 2 points I wanted to say and bring for discussion. Yeah. Also one thing I remembered during Susan's speech, because I was a participant of CCR Playing residency here in New York and Philadelphia in 2019, and we talked a lot about like how we can build a community, and this stuff seemed a little bit abstract, because when you talked about that, you don't really know how it will work for you personally. And in my situation, when I had to leave my country, it's really worked, because, for example, one of participants who've been with me, he basically hosted me and my spouse in Azerbaijan, because it was trouble with tickets, and I had to spend some time in Azerbaijan, and we went there, and he bought stuff, and it was very open, and he feed us, and it was a really nice example of how it works. And I put an abstract.
Thank you. This is very important. Thank you. I wanna read all the panelists and give the applause. Well done. And I mean, like, well, we still have we still have 25 minutes for open discussion. So I hope more people can now join us. But already at this stage, it's just like I was very curious what they say, and I think it's just like a beautiful puzzle that we put together. And it's just like it's so much sad, because sadly it's been like almost 2 years since the war started, but I really heard new things, and very, I think like all of us were very sincere in developing our points. So yeah, I'm looking forward to more things. And now the floor is open for your questions, both online and offline. Who would like to start? We have Alexis Lerner.
Hi, thank you. This was one of the best NYU roundtables I've seen. I really enjoyed it. I already wrote you an email, Rita. I'm so excited about your work. And I have to say, I agree about the comment that, people aren't really talking about this since the war. And I believe Susan said, and my question for you, Rita, is, you brought up the Street Art Museum in St. Petersburg, and I work on graffiti, political graffiti, and I get the sense that it sort of closed quietly. And I wanted to hear your take on what happened there. There was so much excitement, and clearly it closed quietly during the war. But what else can you share with us? What happened to it?
Well, I just like first, absolutely lovely meeting you. And I myself, so I realized that you're in graffiti, and I write about street art too, and I think it's a very powerful tool. So as I realized that the museum was closed in protest of the war, to the war, and it was one of the very alternative places in St. Petersburg, connecting the kind of restricting tradition of high art, as they were always pairing themselves with the Hermitage in a very alternative and I would even say queer way. So and I just think that the absence of this institution and cultural space of St. Petersburg is very speaking. So that's a powerful gesture to close the institution. I know if some from the audience want to share their opinion about that, like that.
You are right. You are right.
Yeah. We just have a founding representative of the museum at the road. Yeah, confirming my points. But it was very important, and I collaborated with the museum as a researcher, curator, and a friend of museum, and I believe it done a lot of work that still speaking, though the museum is not present. Thank you, Alexis, and I'm looking forward to read your letter. Do we have more remarks, questions, comments? Oh yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much for launching this discussion. It's really important today. My first question is about creative ecology. You mentioned this term, and I'm interested in it because I am writing a book, among others, about ecological projects in the post-Soviet space, and I think it's highly important to evolve this subject beyond the human, so to say, not only the human who are suffering. And I just wanted to ask you if it's a kind of metaphor. Is it ecology of human or inhuman? And the second question is for everyone. How do you reflect on the separation of different public spaces in Russia for those who are alternative and not agree with this war and with the conservative politics of Putin and everywhere else? Because of course we can talk about transnational, translocal and global communities, but I think it's sort of utopia, because we have two sort of split of this public spaces inside and outside. And I'm observing maybe sort of return to the era of the Cold War with this different worlds. So how do you see the possible consequences of this deterritorializing with immigration of so many artists, activists? Are we observing, or are we living in the time of new underground, maybe, of different spaces of immigrated and non-immigrated and so on? Such an open question to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Claudia. Because the first question was to me, I just want to address creative ecology, and really thank you for asking. I like to talk about that. So it's just like when I speak about cultural work, and I think the dominant debate about production of culture is a very individualistic view on it, like competing, and if you take like Bourdieu's perspectives, struggling artists climbing the top of the art world, which is sometimes given. I know if you take all of these rankings and you check like art facts and art review power 100, stuff like that, it's just like Forbes of art. So that's with this present economy, I think like a lot of people who actually make art or make museums alive are not credited and unrecognized. So my work is about that. And I have special interest and so-called technical personnel of museums as security guards, as museum guides, as docents, and so many of those. So I started my exploring this world with them, but then I realized it really, because for all of these people, museum or any like cultural spaces, they're not just workplaces, they're so much more. So they, in a way, they dwell, they live in there. And that's why making this place home, it's not just only human presence. So I developed some of the topics connected to dirt and dust in museum, for instance. And also it slightly touches plants that are often in museums. And then I'm also developing a topic, speaking of inhuman presence, a topic of animals in museums, like namely museum cats and sometimes lizards. And that was, I hope to get back to it, was a very interesting Italian case with cockroaches. So I see like all of these different subjectivities, human and inhuman, actually make this place and make alive, and the culture only possible as a dialogue. So creative ecology is about that, and I'm dreaming to develop more cases. And luckily, so I'm based between New York and Boston, and luckily it's a very fertile soil to explore furthermore these opportunities. So yeah, thank you for your question. And I just want to briefly address the second one. And I mean, like I find it very interesting, and I play this game mentally, like comparing today's situation to Cold War and Iron Curtain. And then I would just I would just consider very closely like how we exchange information, because pandemic actually did a lot, and now we have all these platforms. And I believe, well, a lot of people who now in Russia, they are on the Zoom. And it's just like a second ago, my parents texted me asking how they're in Russia, and I think my greeting to them said they said they're very worried how's the lecture going. So it's not directly a the situation, and it gives me a lot of hope. Yeah.
I'd like to add a little. I actually, unfortunately, have a different feeling about the return to sort of the Cold War feelings. And in some ways, I feel like it's much more destructive than it was during the Cold War. The whole cancel culture mentality I find frightening. And, you know, the fact that people, you know, say we can't read Russian literature, we can't listen to Russian music. I just don't understand that at all. And I think it's a really scary trend that we are working forward. And I really hope that this mentality ends soon. And I think it's incredibly destructive. The other thing I thought it was interesting, you're talking about, will there be a development of underground arts institutions in Russia? And so far, I mean, I'm curious what you've heard. I haven't heard much about that. I think that the people who were doing things that were alternative and sort of, they weren't underground, but they were quietly done, have left, because I think they felt so threatened that most of those people who would have, you know, tried to do things underground are gone. I mean, there's still a few small organizations, and I think probably people are trying to subtly do political exhibitions and everything, but it's become so difficult that I don't see an underground culture starting at this point. On the positive side, I mean, even though it's, I think, incredibly sad and destructive having so many creative people leaving Russia, I think it's really benefiting the countries they're going to. And I really saw that when I was in Almaty and Bishkek and Uzbekistan, that the Russians are really becoming very active participants in the cultures that they're going to and working with interesting organizations and doing interesting things. And I think they're enlivening the cultural atmosphere in the places that they're going to.
For the public space, I would like to say, in a society under a political strongman, it's really difficult to activate a public space, even from a professional urban planning or architecture design. The architect or urban planner would like to create a lot of physical public space, but it depends on the political situation. It depends on the course of the free speech. Yeah, if you want to activate the public space that engage people that can tell the truth or express their opinion in the public space, it really depends on the political atmosphere. And as my experience, I really every time I did the curatorial projects, organize a biennale or exhibition, I would like to always try to activate those so-called public space in China. In almost every city in China, there's always have a square in front of the government building. They build this square for people, right? But actually, no people dare to express their idea there. So what I can do just, okay, maybe we can organize some event for entertainment and invite ordinary people, the audience to go there, even to become a kind of market, something like that. It is also a process that like the political side, the space, that is the first step. And if you want to speak some radical political idea in those space, that is impossible because the system, it's not allowed you. Maybe you need to pay a very heavy cost when you speak out some sensitive issues.
I'll just add that I want to, I guess, underline this idea of polyphonic creative expression, and that there may be forms, that we are not hearing now, right? That are not visible to us now, but which I'm certain are happening in Russia. And I also think too that the question of then the translocal networks, and also thinking of, for example, Rita Help's, also thinking of Unin's book Utopia in Practice, in which he documents a project which is Utopia in Practice, the Bishan Commune rural reconstruction project that he led, and that was ended due to government repression in China. That those projects, those presences, those conversations have an impact. They affect people's horizon of imagination, horizon of potential connection, and maybe to use the powderized term of the sodalities, the connections that we imagine that we have across long distances that are affected not only by communication networks, but also I think by the practices that they witness, the practices that they hear about, the relationships that they hear about. But thank you for the question. It's very important. Thank you.
I think Well, Nikita, do you want to say something? And then we had Chris and then you. And
No, I'm good, yeah.
oh, okay. I would add about underground that I would say like the tradition of underground as well as tradition of official culture, and I talked about that today in my part. It's still there, and some of the people who actually witness Soviet regime as cultural production, well, they put it out there in my interviews and on their Facebook posts, like, okay, like we just open this folder again, and that's how we do it now, like writing between the lines. So the strategies, rather tactic than strategy, the tactics are still there, I would say. And Chris.
Yeah, I think I'm going to just repeat basically what everyone's been saying, but I wanted to kind of call out this question of the space of resistance and thinking about that kind of collectively all of you have represented these kind of networks and these networks of exchange, and not just networks of ideas or kind of abstract networks, but quite practical networks about relationships. And for example, in your own story, Rita, and yours, Nikita, you know, that these networks weren't necessary to became enabled as practical, right? People need money, they need a place to stay, they need resources. Similarly, in your case, in sort of, you know, in your decision to move to the United States, and you know, so there's something that I think collectively we represent as kind of new forms of networks, but networks that are also new ways to imagine the world. I think as Dalia is saying, that it's a remapping of the world in a sense that is possibly a democratic remapping, right? And that kind of collectively, you know, if we pay attention to that, there, you know, I think it is, you know, it is a practice. It's a political practice that has implications far beyond just the individual case of each person, while always important, nevertheless creates a new form of collectivity.
Thank you, Chris. Do you want us to react?
I'm just playing back, I think, what you know, again, just as I kind of piece together, first of all, this is a fantastic conversation. Thank you for convening it. Thank everyone you. But I just the ideas that you've sparked for me and thinking about these things are already in place in some sense, and the intensification of crisis then activates this towards a democratic end rather than a repressive authoritarian.
No, thank you, because I think what you've done is given a nice optimistic twist. It's a dark moment in history, so.
Right. Very dark.
That, yeah.
Very dark moment.
Yeah.
But again, you know, it's with, you know, Great Depression comes great resistance.
Yes,
you
yeah,
know.
that's true.
It's just like if I want to add to it and like talk about my personal trajectory, and that's something that's been discussed a lot with my therapist. And then thanks to her, she's in Russia too. And I just like, I mean, when the war started, and so what happened to me, I went to UC Berkeley for 1 month research stay, and well, this month I was fired from my 10-year job in Russia, and I lost my occupation. I lost money, and I'm at risk. Like that's a big risk that I'll be arrested if I'm back with this regime. And I ended up thinking about that like a metaphor of it, just like imagine it was a big explosion, and it put you in there, and it's like a slow-mo when you fly, and you know it's very dangerous. It's because it was an explosion, and you fly, and it's kind of a beautiful flight because you reveal many things from a very different perspective, but you know that you're gonna land and it's gonna be very, very painful. So that's a very interesting feeling of amazement, fear, shock, and well, to me, I'm still flying and I feel unrooted. But together with that, like, it's like spiders, like this connection, and mapping the words just like spiders web. So temporary, like you kind of land up there. And I mean, like, I'm so grateful to all my friends, collaborators who never turned back and offered me a lot of resources, like help and their shoulders, and this is just amazing. And like, well, a lot of people use this metaphor of iron curtain, or complete like rupture between like what's in Russia, or what's out there or in there. But it's just like, I know that what we've been building, like all these networks, all this work, all these friendships, like they didn't disappear, and they are there, and like spiders web, they hold us. Oh, okay.
Thank you so much. I guess my question is putting this, the cultural response to the Russian war in a general cultural context, especially in response to the diminishing costs to make and to share art. Now it's cheaper and easier than ever to produce and share art. I guess my question is, do you think that the internet and how easy it is to share and convene ideas has desensitized people from cultural resistance and revolutionary art? Or has it increased the impact it has in a political response to conflict?
Interesting. Is it to all? Oh, Nikita, do you want to take this one?
Let me think.
Yeah, as a media,
That's a good question.
media artist,
good
does that. No, I mean, like, I can start with like I also work as a digital curator, and it just like my hope for this new economy for digital art was huge, because I saw it as a matter of support for artists who are in problematic regions. But they just like, I would say, with the legislation that exists in so many countries, it's not easy. And it just like still it's like way more troubles than I saw in the beginning. And also, I mean, with digital art, it's just like also AI as a problem, because it's really hard to for a curator or anyone who deals with like promoting digital art, actually to prove it's worth, I know, buying, worth supporting, because of AI like took all the value of it. So no, that's interesting to think about art as material basis, and also, but in terms of exchanging art, at least, which maybe support artists in non-monetary way only, it actually, like, speaking about this iron curtain situation, like digital art can give a lot. And also, I mean, like, thinking about organizing this exhibition, it's just interesting, like what we can deliver, and how, and it's just like it's very like, there was a presentation by Thomas that project a couple of weeks ago here, and it's also interesting, like what method they use to overcome iron curtain, and I think that's how we can learn from the past. So, we want to contribute.
Yes, I'll jump in. Thank you for the question, and it's so important, and it's so complex. Also, many of the artists whose work I engage with are in fact digital media artists, people who do, for example, online archives or participatory work that is based on having an online hub for gathering or for creating work together, and also artists who understand the internet as the main space of distribution of their work. So I think with that said, I would answer, it depends. It depends on the context. It depends on the range of conditions, social conditions, geopolitical conditions in which the work is being produced. So, for example, during the Egyptian Revolution, there were many different examples of artists who engaged the intense way that people were following what was happening during the revolution on Twitter, to then create documentation. And here I'm thinking about particular collectives and also individual artists who then started creating works that they communicated on Twitter would be screened in person in particular neighborhoods. And then they also gathered their documentation and began distributing it through a website. And so there was just like this intense kind of engagement with that work at that moment. And so it was super effective, as a site of exchange and information transmission and creative imagining of the possibility of that moment. At the same time, now there's also the problem or the challenge, the welcome challenge really, of archiving that work. And so there's been about a 10-year process of artists and collectives and curators and activists and scholars who are working on archiving the work that was produced, the digital media and video work that was produced during the Egyptian Revolution. And so this is another sort of question, which is the archive, which also Rita mentioned, which is how do we archive these particular moments, which is an incredibly important and urgent question for all of us to consider. What is the work that we are seeing? How do we archive it? How do we responsibly care for, our access to artworks, information, et cetera? And also, how do we not necessarily entrust it to existing archives? What new forms of archive do we actually need? And maybe I'll just mention one other project, which is by our colleague also at the Center for Arts, Design, and Social Research and professor at Batman University, Palin Tan, who created an online archive, again, with a group of scholars and activists of the Gezi Park occupation, which was another moment of very intense digital engagement and digital media art production related to the Gezi Park occupation in Istanbul, and that also had many other ripples of activism. And that is a very beautiful online archive that you can find by looking for the Gezi Park online activist video archive in Palin Tan. So, but many years of work and gathering and a very beautiful project of creating that archive, but which then also creates the other question of how do we engage with that archive? How do we make it live? What kinds of conversations do we create around it? How could it be, a very alive, living resource for us, again, in terms of our kind of horizon of possibility.
Thank you, Dalit. I think we can take two finalized short questions, and one is right over there, and then we'll wrap up. Yours, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was I had a comment to what the student was talking earlier about Russians going to other countries and how they, live there. So I had to. I'm glad to see that they can improve things around, but also there is a challenge in some countries like Georgia.
Yes.
I want to share with you, because I had a 1-year-long project in Georgia for artists, but artists who left Russia and Belarus, organizing a residency program, and we hosted different artists throughout the year. But it's a dynamic, so they kind of encouraged them to interact with Georgian community and invited them to dialogue and talk to each other. And what we learned is that many Georgian artists actually don't have opportunity to talk to any Russian. So they really feel that they are occupying the territory more than enhancing it, and not even understanding that. But like in their minds, they're not so equal Russians that have to leave as well. And this is something that needs educational tools, I feel, and we try to, help with that. But I think there was more work that could be done in this direction. And people actually were really happy and thankful when the Georgian artists were thankful eventually for the opportunity to be able to talk to Russian artists and actually understand why they and how it is in Russia learning things and speaking up, and why they can go on the street because they don't understand that. And it's just interesting how dynamic also was changing through this year, so through this and I mean, and it's I guess it's again more challenging as the war progresses, but interesting. So, and I think another educational effort I think that has to be done is within Russia in terms of post-colonial education for Russians, because Russian citizens, even that are not, against the they don't really have a lot of exposure to this knowledge, this scholarship. There is not, it's almost non-existent in Russian. This is something that maybe we could introduce, we are as cultural workers and even, being out there. But it's something that I feel is very valuable, and many artists, thinking artists, most of them who live, they are, engaging with that, but other people, not so much.
Thank you, because actually it is true, and I made it sound as if it's only positive side of them going. And I know we actually planned to do one of our projects in Georgia, and we couldn't. We were told that our Georgian artists wouldn't participate, and also in we had a great experience on Almaty. We were very welcome. Our Russian artists were very welcome, and it was a very productive conversation. But I did hear from others who felt like Russians had invaded their country, were taking away their jobs, and it is an issue, and it has to be discussed. There is definitely a negative and positive of all of this. I completely agree, and I think I also agree that in Russia there needs to be more discussion and education about the impact of colonialism. It is not understood well. But I don't think we can do it now. I mean, at least we can't do it openly right now. I'm sure that it's so against what the government is teaching everyone and showing everyone. But it's a difficult conversation, because even in Almaty, when we had a conversation with the Kazakh and Russian American artists about colonialism, it ended in tears. The Kazakhs and the Tatar and someone from Bashkiria, I mean, they were crying, trying to explain to the Russians the impact of Russian imperialism on their cultures. And the Russian artists who were, very progressive people who, very much against it, they didn't really understand, and they hadn't heard this before.
And also starts with sensitivity to languages, for example.
It's
even
exactly.
that everyone understands Russian.
Exactly. So we actually had we tried to have a program in English, so that which again is choosing another colonial language, but for that region, it's a more neutral one. But there's so many issues, and it really needs to be discussed. But the scary thing for me is that I feel like it's being discussed without Russian participation, and that's not very productive.
I think that's absolute need in this conversation, and it just like the facilitation is not an impossible trouble, but it's very interesting how should we organize that. And Russian participants who are aware of the need, like even inside Russia, because colonization, it's not just about Russian Empire experience or Soviet Union. It's also about like so many cultures inside Russia. And I just like, it's paradoxical that sometimes like Russians want to encourage the dialogue, but isn't that's a reinforcement of colonial power in producing this critique? So that's an issue, like how to facilitate without taking a lead. And I think a lot about that. And really, thank you very much for bringing this up. This is very important for the future we can build. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a super important conversation, but I guess I would maybe pull the lens back a little bit and say, in a sense, we're going through a kind of global reckoning of colonialism. Because everything you're describing is going on here in the United States too.
Europe.
And the resistance to, for example, critical race studies, right? What we see the rollback in terms of like these historical kinds of facts of slavery, disenfranchisement, and the inability to kind of confront these histories, work through them, and account for them.
Yeah.
And so I do think there is a kind of now global process that we're undergoing a kind of colonial reckoning.
Yes, I just want to just jump. Also, thank you so much for the bringing forth of the question of decoloniality and the I wanted to mention also, I mentioned the work of Martina Klostanova, who is based in Sweden, and her amazing writing and pedagogy, teaching, activism, curation of exhibitions and other events that are absolutely opening this conversation, and also I wanted to mention the work of our colleague Daria Krivonos, who's based in Helsinki, who's talking about, who is a decolonial thinker, Russian decolonial thinker, but also who's thinking through the racialization of Russian immigrants in the Nordic region. And so to further complicate our understanding even of Russian identity as a racialized identity in situations of immigration. And so I just think these different dimensions, again, the polyphonic kind of dimensions of polyphonic. Yeah, and they draw again to the question of interrelation. And the reason I draw our attention to interrelation is precisely as a tactic, a pedagogy of transformation. And so when we think in the sense of making the road by walking, rather than thinking in this broad way, how can we transform relations of coloniality? It's very easy to, just give up, say that that's impossible. But when we think about particular people, particular relationships, particular situations in which we are able to affect conversations, transformative pedagogies, archives, whatever our appropriate mode is, then I think there is an actual horizon of possibility. So I just want to underline those ideas for us.
Thank you, Dalida, for your comment. And we just have the very last opportunity to ask a very short question, but if you can't sleep tonight without asking this question or delivering this comment, please reveal yourself. Please ask anyone. Very last opportunity. Yes, do that. Yes.
I was just thinking a bit about what we're saying about the Iron Curtain again. And the thing is that I think that even when using this metaphor, we should like not use it performatively, in a way that like the experience of Cold War should not also kind of lead us in a wrong direction. Because like this already made scenario imaginary where there are two poles of the world which argue against each other is like something which also kind of our politicians wants like the situations to be. And I think kind of we're at some point when obviously when just war began and everyone, I mean, we're kind of like falling out of the traumatic part of that obviously will be with us, yes, but we have to kind of find a new, I mean, like ways to okay, like yes, there's no trust in politicians in Russia. There could be no trust in politicians in states as well, and like just the current events of the political kind of the new wars only more and more, and it's just like it all. I think it should lead to kind of a productive future in a way that like the dialogue of not two polarized sides of the world without Iron Curtain in the middle of it, but what you said about the coordination in individual level, individual artists, and to organizing like conference that at least from a kind of from this United States side could be kind of organized with kind of a welcome from Russian artists or researchers. And if they don't, because I think that the great danger is to kind of to fall apart, to lose contact with the real Russia, with those artists and academics who stayed there and could not leave, and to kind of keep the contact real is what is the productive need apart from discussing the trauma itself.
Yeah. Thank you. I think that's a great way to conclude. And I really hope that, well, some of the people who are still in Russia, as I know, they are on Zoom, and so the record will be published at Journal Center website and YouTube channel. And please, if you can, share it. And I just hope and I make all the possible moves to make those people who fight in the war and still in Russia and leave as a long process to leave, so that we are here also for them. And yes, thank you. I mean, I have a very good feeling at the moment, and the way of like we created something together. I'm very grateful to all of you. And then, well, Jordan Center, Tufts University Artist Protection Fund for supporting my work, and there will be more. So please keep in touch. And yeah, you get my email. Yeah, just let's talk. Yeah, thank you.